Welcome everybody to another hardcore video. This will be 200 days of my hardcore world. If you haven't already seen my last 100-day video, then I highly recommend you do. At the time of recording this intro, the last video has over 4,000 views. And for a small YouTuber like me, that's kind of a big jump. That being said, thank you, I appreciate it. Alright, anyways, 200 days. Goals I want to achieve before the 200-day mark. I read a few comments on things I should add to my world, so I want to try to tackle those as soon as possible. I also want to be able to create a god set with god tools. In order for that to happen, I'll have to upgrade all of my tools and armor to netherite. The last goals I want for this video is to kill the wither and kill the ender dragon. Now if you do enjoy this video, I kindly ask that you click that subscribe button and click the bell so you don't miss a single video that I upload. It helps my channel grow and I'd really appreciate it. Anyways, 200 days starts now. On day 101, we do the usual by checking up on the farm. Afterwards, I drop back down to the mine to see if I can get any extra resources. I ended up finding more diamonds while digging a 4x4 tunnel. I also went back down there to get some extra coal and redstone. After coming back up, day 1 was already over. Day 102 starts off with this enderman so kindly dropping me 3 ender pearls. I decided why not go on an early adventure, so that's what me and my horse did. I came across this village not too far from my house. The village was pretty boring, so I just left it behind. After crossing more hills and valleys, day 102 finally came to an end. I woke up on day 103 finding myself a ruined portal. There is nothing worth grabbing, so I left it. A few hundred blocks later, I came across a flower forest on the side of this ocean. I decided to sail at sea, but I was afraid I would never find my horse, so I decided to take land instead. Land probably would have been the easiest way to go anyway. Once again, I found a useless ruined portal. I didn't realize I had a lead, so I decided to grab my horse and take him at sea with me. I would definitely regret this later. My horse kept getting stuck in the water behind me. I had to turn around and go get him each time, which really ticked me off. I don't know what my obsession was with ruined portals, but I just had to stop each time to explore it. I also completely forgot that I had my horse tied up and he went down in the water with me. He started to drown, but I wasn't too worried since he had a lot of health. He eventually made it back up to the surface and we started to head on our way. I set camp on this little island as day 103 came to an end. Day 104 begins with a little sob story. I had had enough of my horse preventing me from exploring, so I put it out of its misery. It was a little upsetting, but I decided to keep his armor in his honor. After that horrible tragedy, I finally made land to our first desert. There's a savanna right next to it, but those are pretty lame. I saw a ruined portal next to this sand hill, and to my surprise, I got a free golden apple. I finally came encounter with my first desert temple. It was a little covered up by sand, but that wasn't an issue at all. I very much regret going down there. It was just disappointing. The best thing I got was probably the TNT. I got a few emeralds, but that was about it. I came across my first desert village, but of course I wasn't really interested in it. I was really amazed at my world generation. The more I explored, the more cool generation I found. Take these hills for example. These are probably the coolest desert hills I've ever seen. The more places I explore, the more it makes me just want to set up base there. Day 104 came to an end, so I decided to set up camp on this little desert island. Day 105, I come across another desert village. I've pretty much lost all interest in looting villages, so I decided to loot the shipwreck right next to it. The ship didn't have that much to offer, but it did have a map that I wanted to go find. Once I found it, the loot wasn't too bad. It would have been nice to have some extra diamonds, but heart of the sea, iron and gold was just fine. I started making my way back home since nothing was too interesting. I also brought this turtle with me for no reason. I found another ruined portal, and you can probably already guess what I'm going to say. The loot was useless! I also didn't realize that this turtle was pregnant, so I decided to let it go. I accidentally hit it, but it didn't harm it too much. I crossed over this hill to see the sunset go down as day 5 came to an end. I spotted a coral reef biome that could be used later during these 200 days. I've always thought coral reef biomes are one of the coolest biomes in the ocean. I also passed over an ocean monument. I was never able to do it during these 200 days, but maybe if we do 300 days, I could tackle it. I finally made it across land and started walking home by foot. I passed over some ice spike biomes, which I thought was pretty neat. It wasn't too far from my home, so maybe I could build something here eventually. I saw a few foxes, and since I had a lead, I decided to take the child. I thought it would be easier for the child to trust me. It kept trying to escape, so I gave it one of my golden apples to try to calm it down. It worked perfectly and he accepted my gift. Me and the fox came back on day 108 and I introduced him to my village. He was pretty excited to have a new home. I looked around knowing how ugly my landscape was, so I thought it was about time to start terraforming the area a bit. I started by flattening the land and filling up some patches in the ground. I made the land look a little bit more smooth by adding a slope. I thought it would make the land more smooth and natural. Day 108 came to an end and I had some big projects going forward from here. The next few days, I thought it would be a good idea to make a gunpowder farm if I ever wanted to make rockets or more TNT. I don't know why I built it because I would later tear it all down. I didn't think it fit the scenery very well and I just thought it was ugly. I thought it would be a better idea to move my fox from the high ground down to the farm. I didn't want my fox to die, so I tried to make him as safe as possible. I don't know why I thought it was a good idea to go back down to the mine shaft because I would never ever return here again. Like all the other times before, I came back up with an empty pocket. Day 111, I figured why not try to do one of the most relaxing things in Minecraft. So I crafted up a fishing rod, went down to the river, and started fishing for a little bit. After fishing for a little bit, I finally got the achievement for the first time in over 100 days. After fishing for a while, I went to go check up on how my crops were doing, and they were doing pretty good. The farm was working pretty well. If I wanted a lot, I would probably have to AFK. I bought a few ender pearls from the cleric since I was going to need them to light the end portal in the future. It's not too common that you see a cat appear from thin air as the sun's going down. I want to apologize to this cat for putting it in this situation. I traded up the rest of the crops that I had to the villagers since business was booming. I haven't been to the nether yet, so I decided to bring all the TNT that I had to go nether hunting. I was told Y17 to Y15 were the best places to find ancient debris, so that's where I set my TNT. I really wish I had more TNT because this was actually really effective. I only found one vein of ancient debris, but it was better than nothing. I went tunneling a little bit more with my pickaxe, but I wasn't having much luck. After mining for a little bit longer, I left nether with 3 ancient debris. It wasn't enough to make a bar, but it was better than nothing. I downloaded the texture pack from Vanilla Tweaks to help me see every single potion combination. This was actually really useful, so I didn't have to go search up how to make a certain potion every single time. I went back to the nether since I wasn't done with it completely. This time I was on the search for a nether fortress. If I really wanted to complete the goals I made before this video, I would have to find a nether fortress. So I started to mine in a direction that I haven't been before. I wasn't really paying attention when all of a sudden the skeleton just shot me out of nowhere. I don't know if you can tell, but it really jump scared me. I nearly fell out of my chair since I wasn't really paying attention to my surroundings. A normal person would probably go around exploring different biomes to try to find a nether fortress. But no, not me. I decided to dig a staircase downwards and guess what I find? Yeah, a nether fortress. I knew I had entered the fortress when the achievement popped up. Luckily, I had a looting 3 swords, so blaze rods would not be a problem. I wanted to be as cautious as possible, so I started blocking off each entrance with a door. Another reason I wanted to find a fortress was to get netherwarts. Netherwarts are essential to make potions, so each little farm netherwart that I saw in this fortress I would grab. I don't know why, but 5 or so pigmen were just chilling on this chest, so I just left them. And yeah, blaze rods were probably too easy to get. Upon killing this wither skeleton, I got my first wither skull. I probably wasn't even in the fortress for more than 5 minutes and I already got a skull. The loot in the fortress wasn't too bad. I kept getting consistent diamonds and diamond horse armor. I also grabbed the obsidian because why not? Not too long after getting my first skull, I finally got my second skull. Since getting these skulls was pretty easy, I decided to stay a little longer to get the last skull. About 20 minutes later, I finally got the last skull. I was one step closer of achieving one of my goals and killing the wither. Once I came back home, I decided to store all my loot and I realized I had over a stack of blaze rods. That was definitely more than enough. I went back to the nether not to go netherite hunting or explore, but to get levels. And the easiest way to do that was to mine a bunch of quartz. Once I came back home, I made all my quartz into blocks, stored them in my chest, and had over 30 levels to my name. This extra diamond pickaxe that I had an option for silk touch, so that's what I went with. I figured it would be a good option so I can start mining beehives. I made a few other diamond pickaxes and this one had efficiency 4. It wasn't efficiency 5, but it was better than nothing and I can always enchant it to efficiency 5 later on. But to my surprise, it came with Unbreaking 3 and Fortune 3, which is more than I asked for. I combined in one of my mending books and the pickaxe to make it my main pickaxe. Day 119, I figured it was finally time to move my fox down to the farm. Like I said, I didn't want my fox to die and I wanted to keep it as safe as possible. He was having a hard time to adjust at first, but later on he'd find it to be his home. Well, for now. I also decided to name tag him. I thought it was about time, so I looked at his tail and I thought of the word puffy, so I named him Puff. He seemed to have liked his name since he calmed down a little bit. Now I started to use my silk touch pickaxe to mine beehives. I wanted to try to get as much bees in one beehive as possible. I found a lonely bee in the forest, so I decided to take it back to my farm. But don't worry, he'll have a perfect home eventually. On day 120, I fed Puff beef as breakfast. It was one of his favorite meals of the day. I realized I had a few bows just sitting there in my chest, so I decided to grab them and combine them together in my anvil. It wasn't the best bow, but it was better than nothing. Later that day, I went back to the forest to start mining some logs. I would craft these up into planks so I can use them for beds. Afterwards, I went around gathering some wool. Before the day ended, I used all the wool and planks I had to make as many beds as possible. I really wanted to get full netherite armor and tools, so I went back down to the nether and used the beds to go netherite hunting. I stayed as far back as I could so I wouldn't accidentally blow myself up. After making a tunnel for my bed explosions, I came across some ancient debris. I was down there for a long time, but I gotta say, it was totally worth it. This is the second time I was mining out a tunnel and I found more ancient debris. I got pretty lucky with this one because this one's a 3 vein. I came home with 9 blocks of ancient debris plus the 3 I had stored in the chest, which equaled 3 bars. I put it in my furnace so it could all smelt into scraps. I decided to use one of the bars that I had on the really good pickaxe that I was using. In my opinion, I think it was worth it. I stored the rest of the bars away later on for my armor. I went to the enchantment table to see if we had any good enchantments for my diamond armor. This was the armor set that I wanted to make personally. The enchantments weren't too bad, but I know they could be better. On day 123, I started making a hole on the side of my house. I wanted to have a tiny little cave under my house for no apparent reason. So I started to mine out the entrance of the cave. While collecting wool from sheep, I came encounter with my first pillagers. I thought I was pretty prepared, so I killed the captain and got bad omen. This wasn't going to turn out well at all. When I got into the vicinity of my village, I started a raid. And this was on purpose. First few rounds weren't that hard, but it kept getting harder. The main reason why I started the raid in the first place was to try to get totems of undying. I had killed all the raiders on top of my house, including the guy who had the totem of undying. So if I were to get close to dying, I probably wouldn't have to worry too much. Luckily, I had a gate to stop the Ravager from getting in. This would make it a lot easier to kill since I could just shoot it from a distance. I ran out of arrows, so I quickly had to make a Fletcher to get more arrows. I got more than enough arrows, so the fight shouldn't be as hard. Until the Vexes started hoarding me. This is where I knew trouble was going to happen. I had to eat a golden apple a few times since the Vexes were just doing so much damage. They're probably the worst part of the raid because they do a lot of damage and they're small to hit. There weren't too many raiders left, but the Vexes just kept coming out of nowhere and I couldn't see who was making them. Like I said, this raid took a few days. On day 125, I finished off the last few mobs of the raid. I didn't want to get caught in the crossfire, so I shot them from a distance. And my aim was absolutely horrible. I knew I had completed the raid when I got the achievement and fireworks cheering my victory on. Yeah, I will never be doing a raid anytime soon. Well, on the bright side, at least I got some deals off and a few totems of undying. Yeah, after that raid, I figured it was time to go get full netherite armor. So, I gathered up a bunch of beds and headed straight to the nether. I started to mine the interior walls inside my mine and it actually worked pretty well. A few days of mining around in the nether, I came back with 13 ancient debris. That would be enough for a full set of netherite, and I'd have some bars left over. After smelting some of the debris, I went back down to the farm and fixed some of the damages that the raid had caused me. A little bit later, I started looking at enchantments that I could possibly put on my armor. It would take time to get the enchantments that I wanted on my armor, but it would all work out eventually. I went to check up on my furnace to see that all of my bars had smelted. I had 5 ingots, meaning I could make a whole armor set plus an extra tool. Towards the end of the day, I decided to tear down the creeper farm and make it into something better. Day 129, I went back to the forest to mine some trees, and here's a little jump cut of that. After getting more than enough logs for this project, I started building the exterior of my new bee farm. I wanted it to be a pretty big circular shape, so that's what I went for. Once I finished building up the walls, I started to work on the glass dome that I wanted for the roof. I got a lot of work done these few days, and I was pretty proud of myself. On day 132, my fox got stuck in one of the villager farms, so I had to get him down from there. After I got him down, I fed him his favorite breakfast, beef. Since I didn't have access to a close desert, I had to buy glass off of my librarian. Afterwards, I started working on the underground cave a little bit more. I had no idea what I was going to do with it, but I was definitely going to do something with it eventually. The next few days, I was determined to get the 2 books that I wanted the most, Unbreaking 3 and Protection 4. I started to label the villagers and the books they sold to make it easier on myself. This is so I don't have to go through every single villager and find the wrong book. After a little bit of job switching with this villager, I was finally able to get Unbreaking 3. I would have preferred Protection 4, but you can't always get what you ask for. I also saw a great opportunity to get Sharpness 5 on my sword since my sword wasn't that powerful. For the next few days, I went back to the nether. I didn't really know what I was going to go for, but I didn't really want to go netherite hunting. So instead, I went down the path I made a while ago to try to find something new. I realized that I have never been down the ravine that I bridged over, so I decided to go explore that. To my surprise, a little further down, and I saw a bastion at the corner of my eye. It was a really odd place for a bastion to be, considering it was inside of a ravine. So, I had to go explore that. And just like that, I had entered my first bastion. I was quite surprised it was hidden down here all along. All I had to do was go down into that ravine and I would have found it. A little bit down the hall and I came in contact with my first piglin brute. Thankfully the AI was being dumb and he fell right into the lava. I just sat there and watched him suffer a painful and long death. Going up to the second floor, I found a big stash of gold blocks. A little bit more exploring in the bastion, I came in contact with my first gilded blackstone and my first chest. The chest had a lodestone and I thought that was pretty lucky. If I ever went far to the nether, I could always use the lodestone to find my way back home. It was definitely the most disappointing bastion I've ever seen, so I decided to go back home. On day 138, I of course had to feed Puff his favorite food. I had also checked on the farm and it wasn't doing so great. Later that day, I decided to clear some area so I could build my new project. I started to mine all the grass and dirt blocks. I also filled up some holes in the ground to make the area look more smooth. Days 139 to 140, I headed back to the nether to get a bunch of levels. I made sure to get more than 30 levels so I can ensure that I had enough levels to complete my armor set. And I'm pretty sure you already knew what I was going to mine to get these levels, so I don't even have to mention it. On day 140, I made my way back home. I haven't done this in a while, so I started getting back to the baby making. I started looking through all the enchantments on my armor and picked the ones that fit best. I figured the helmet and the leggings could wait just a little bit longer. I just realized I had a feather falling 4 book, so I had to grindstone the boots that had feather falling 3. I went back to enchanting and I got protection 4 and unbreaking on my legs. I also managed to get protection 4 and unbreaking 3 on my boots as well. I wanted respiration 3 on my diamond helmet, but I got fire protection, so I decided to grindstone that too. On day 141, I saw that my helmet had protection 3. It wasn't protection 4, but it was better than nothing. You already know what I went to go do. On the same day, I came back to my fox getting stuck in the villager farm again, so I had to get him down. I don't know how I kept doing this. The next morning, I learned that combining enchantment books would be easier and would cost less than an anvil. So that's what I did. I started to combine books for later. I was preparing to get one of my goals done, so I had to get the right potions. I was trying to make strength too. The only downside is it doesn't last as long as regular strength. On day 143, I started to look through the recipe map to see if there's any other potion that I really needed. The only potion that I truly needed was strength 2. I'd also need slow falling potions for the dragon, but that would come later. And just like that, I started cooking up some strength 2 potions. Right after that was done, I had finally decided it was time to make all my diamond armor into full netherite armor. That being said, I finally completed the first goal I made before this video started. I thought I forgot how good full diamond feels like, but full netherite feels so much better. Especially if you're playing in a hardcore world. I was ready to tackle another goal that I had made before the video started. I wanted to defeat the Wither. So I started to sort out my inventory and make it easier on myself just in case if the fight got difficult. But I think I was pretty much ready to take on my first boss ever playing hardcore. I figured the best place to fight the Wither would be down in the mine. All the way at the end of the tunnel, of course. I took some precautions and built a little past the tunnel just in case if things got messy. And then I started to mine out a room that the Wither could be spawned in. I tried to make a room big enough to where the Wither could be spawned in, but small enough to where it wouldn't go everywhere. After placing the 4 blocks of soul sand, it was time to place the 3 heads. And just like that, the Wither was easily defeated. This was definitely the easiest boss fight that I've ever had in my entire life. I did a little double checking to make sure the Wither didn't leave behind any diamonds I made during the tunnel. After putting away some of the diamonds and cobblestone that the Wither had left me, I was ready to make the beacon. All I had to do was get obsidian that I already had and buy some glass off my villager. And that's what I did on day 144. And just like that, the beacon was made. The first ever beacon in this hardcore world. Wait, whoa. Quick editor note. Yeah, I know. We haven't made it to day 50 yet, but that's only because I wasn't recording. So, this is my day 50 bribe for likes. If you haven't already subscribed, then what are you doing? It's completely free and you can always unsubscribe whenever you want. If you do, it helps my channel grow tremendously. At the time of making this interlude, the last video already has over 20,000 views. More views, likes, and subscribers than I've ever had before. So, if you do, I appreciate all of you. Thanks, and we start on day 55. Day 155, I begin gathering some gravel for some coarse dirt and for a path I'm making. I'm trying to make the same path that I made in my regular survival world. A mixture of gravel, andesite, cobblestone, stone bricks, coarse dirt, and grass path. If you guys haven't seen 365 Days of Minecraft Survival, I recommend you go check that out. It gives a great visual idea of what I want this hardcore world to be like. And not to flex or anything, but it's all made in survival. I also figured it would make the scenery a much more prettier place if I added a variation of stone walls. And I was correct, it already looks much more alive. All it needed was more green. Day 156, I started adding bushes behind the wall. Like I said, all it needed was a little bit more green. I also thought it would be a nice idea to add some growing vines to the side of my house. I thought it'd make it look more lively and add some history to it. I also forgot to mention that I put the beacon inside of the bee farm. It fit perfectly and it just looks nicer inside of there. Day 157, I started to expand the landscape next to the bee farm. I needed a little bit more land space to build the structure that I wanted. Once that was done, I went back to some tree chopping. Here's another jump cut for you. Day 158, I decided to make this zombie useful. I plan to turn one of my villagers into a zombie villager and then cure him so he can give me better deals. So I drove him all the way to the villager that I wanted him to kill. And since it's hard mode, it's guaranteed. The zombie was actually doing a lot more damage than I thought he would too. Pretty risky. After he turned the villager into a zombie villager, I killed the zombie and splashed the potion of weakness and gave him a golden apple. The process for curing a zombie villager would take about 5 minutes. Later that same day, I went exploring over some mountains to find some dark oak logs. I was going to use this for my next project, and if I haven't already mentioned it, I was going to make a barn. Once I returned back to the farm, the zombie villager was fully cured. The villager gave me an amazing discount, and if I did this to all my villagers, I could be having almost free items. Days 159 to 162, I began working on my new project. I began building the base structures that would hold up the entire barn. I also made a time lapse of me creating the entire thing. Once I was done with the exterior, I started to work on the interior. I began adding little patches of grass in each barn cell just in case if animals needed to eat. And just like that, by the end of the day, the barn was completely done. All it needed was some animals. And in my opinion, the world was already looking so much more better. The next day, I began gathering some farm animals to put in the barn. The first animals that I chose to be put in the barn were sheep. And I made sure that they wouldn't escape. The next animals that I chose to put in the barn were chicken. I used the rest of the wood that I had left over from the barn to make into sticks. Since my villager had a great discount, I decided to trade all of them. Later that night, while clearing out some of the zombies from my farm, a whole zombie horde came after me. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of panicked a little. I thought I was in the middle of a zombie raid, but no, that's just hardcore for you. Oh yeah, a lot of zombies. It didn't take long to clear them at all since I had a sharpness 5 sword, plus the fire aspect. An enchantment that probably would have been pretty useful in this situation is Sweeping Edge. After clearing all the zombies, I decided it was time to get started on my next big fight, the Ender Dragon. So I started cooking up some slow falling potions. These were probably the most important potions to bring to the end. And of course I was going to bring strength 2 potions in all the totems that I had. With that being said, I started brewing up some strength 2 potions. And I strictly wanted it to be strength 2 potions. After a little brewing, I made about 6 slow falling potions and 3 strength potions. I definitely had more than enough slow falling potions, but I just wanted to have some extras just in case. Afterwards, I went down to my Fletcher and bought some arrows. I wanted to have at least 4 stacks so I can ensure that I had enough to defeat the dragon. As the sun went down, I took one big last look at my beautiful world. I really wanted to be able to see another day in this hardcore world. Even though I'm a very small YouTuber, this last month has been a blast. I've had new viewers every single day and I just want to thank every single one of you. I'd head to the stronghold first thing in the morning. Day 165 was the big day, so I started on my feet. I knew exactly where the stronghold was because I'd been there and I lit the portal prior. And just like that, I found the beacon I made prior to find the stronghold. Also, there was this enderman that had kept following me the entire journey. I think it's a sign. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little creeped out by it too. But as I walk up the steps, I gaze into what could be my future doom. Like I said, these last 200 days have been so exciting. And I just want to thank every single one of you, even if I don't make it out alive. But I knew I would. The battle took about 5 to 10 minutes, but that was it. I had completed the last challenge. I had gotten full netherite armor, tools, I killed the wither, and lastly I killed the dragon. The end gateway was in a perfect position as well whenever I came back. And since I wanted to treat this world as it should be made, yes, I watched the full credits. I came home being able to see another day of my hardcore series. This was very exciting for me. I figured it was about time to make an ender chest, so that's what I did. Just in case if I ever needed to store anything valuable. Anybody who has made it this far in the video, I really want to thank you. You are the ones who make this video do so much better and also help my channel grow. And since I am a little bit on the smaller side of YouTube, I really appreciate it. So thank you. Midday of 166, I began to plan other projects that I may want to start. For starters, I wanted to create a new house. I would also like to be able to complete the bee farm. So I got right to it. I went to the swamp, got some logs, and got a bunch of clay for my new house. The main materials that I wanted for my house was wood, different types of stone, and different colors of terracotta. So all of day 167, I chopped down trees. Towards the end of the day, I gathered some clay blocks that would be later to be turned into terracotta. Day 168, I began going back to work by mining some clay. The regular clay was going to be used to be smelted into bricks. Towards the end of the night, I got home safe and sound with all the materials that I needed. Before I went to bed, I started to smelt it all. Day 169, I took me and my horse out for some resource gathering. When I came back, some of the resources that I put in the furnace were already smelted. On day 170, I came back to a huge surprise to my farm. When I say business was booming, I mean business was booming. I also went back down to the mine to get a load of coal since I was running out of it. I didn't have enough coal left to smelt all the resources that I gathered. When I came back up, the sun had already set. Day 171, I was very determined to get protection 4, and I wasn't going to stop until I got it. While trying to mine the lectern, I accidentally hit the villager, which kind of frustrated me. But not too long after I hit him, I finally got protection 4, after over 170 days. I was gonna buy the book anyway, no matter how much it cost. I really needed the book. Now I had easy access to protection 4, so I can put it on all of my armor. On day 172, I started to clear up a bunch of land. This is the area that I wanted to build my new house at. Later that day, I went to go feed Puff and checked on the business. It was booming. I went back down into the mine to get some extra dirt. I wanted to create the land to build my house on as flat as possible, and as big as possible. On day 175, I started to prepare myself to go back to the end. This time, I wanted to explore the end cities. Once I went to the end portal, I made my way to the end gateway. I also thought it was a good idea to get a few more ender pearls just in case. Once I built the staircase up to the portal, I built a little platform that I could throw my ender pearl through. I was just triple checking that I had everything I needed. If I messed one thing up, it could probably screw my entire game. This was definitely the most anxious part. Every single time I get teleported on an island, I get very freaked out. For some reason, I'm always standing on the edge. But I made sure to cover that up for my own safety. As I was building the platform and my chunks were loading, I spotted an end ship at the corner of my eye. This was huge because I wouldn't have to travel hundreds or even thousands of blocks to find an end city. So I definitely could not screw this up. While bridging over to the nearest island, an enderman almost ruined my entire game by knocking me off. Luckily, I caught myself. I was able to bridge safely over to the island that the end city was on. I wanted to gather some blocks first, just in case if I didn't make it up there all the way. After mining some more chorus fruit and endstone, I spotted another end ship not even 100 blocks away. This was literally the best seed I could have ever gotten. You cannot even make this up. I couldn't believe how lucky I was. I was in shock. I towered up to the first end ship and got a hold of my elytra. One down, one more to go. I also took the tools and the armor that the chest had, just in case if I wanted to grindstone it. The first end city was very bland, so I started to make my way to the second one. 2 dragon heads and 2 elytras. Some of the tools and armor they had was pretty useful, but I was gonna grindstone them anyway. Just like the first end city, the second end city was pretty bland, so I decided to make my way back home. I came back home with 2 elytras, 2 dragon heads, 9 shulker boxes, and a bunch of chorus fruit. That made me pretty happy. I bought a bunch of glass for my villagers since I wanted to work on the dome the next day. So I watched the sunset go down as I had a lot of work ahead of me. On day 178, I started to work on the dome of the bee farm. It was about time that I started back on this project. And just like always, I had to feed Puff his new favorite food. I killed a bunch of squid for the ink sacs. I was going to use the ink sacs to make it into black dye so I can make it into black terracotta. Towards the end of day of 179, I took a big step back from my world and it was looking amazing. Progress was moving pretty fast. Day 180, I started to work on the last finishing touches of the bee dome. Once again, I took one big step back to see how the progress was looking. And in my opinion, that looked like a dome to me. Day 181, I finally finished the dome. All that needed to be added were bees and flowers. I also made a big ring around the dome made out of stone brick slabs. I figured it fit the scenery pretty well. Right after that, I started marking out where the beehives were going to be placed. Day 182, I collected all the beehives that I had and made campfires. And just like that, the bee farm was 100% complete and fully functional. These last few days before 200 days came up were all about building my house. I began gathering more dirt so I can flatten the land that I wanted my house to be set on. Once that was done, I started patching up all the holes in the ground. It did take a few days, but I still had enough time to get started. On days 187 to 192, I finished flattening the land and started to work on my house. I knew I wouldn't have time to fully complete the house, so I started to work on the front. It was better to get started sooner than later. I worked on the front door first and built my way up from there. I was running out of all the stone types pretty quickly, so I went back down to the mine to restock. And with just a few days left, I was able to complete the idea of the house that I wanted. Here's a complete time-lapse of that. I looked at the front from a distance and yeah, I was really liking the design. Whenever I think of a survival Minecraft house, these are the type of houses that I think of. That may just be because I'm a builder. I had wanted to try one last thing before 200 days came up. I wanted to build a Tnt Duplicator to make it easier to mine netherite. I already had all the materials I needed. All I needed was coral reef and ancient debris. And before I went on a sky adventure, I did my typical mob clearing. As the sun was coming up, I decided to go in a direction that I haven't been before. I knew exactly where the last coral reef biome was, but I figured that there was one closer. I stumbled upon a village not too far from my house. I was only interested in its hay bales. Not too far at all, I came across a beautiful lake with a flower forest right next to it. There is also a jungle right behind the flower forest. This is probably the most beautiful spot that I've ever seen in this world. I was really thinking hard about moving here. So if anyone would like to see that, then I would definitely move here. As I was gliding through it, I can just envision a beautiful town on the side of the river. I had finally found an ocean thinking luck had been on my side, but no. The ocean just kept going and going with no sign of coral reef. A little later on, I ended up finding some buried treasure. I was really only interested in the heart of the sea so I can eventually breathe underwater, but the gold and the iron and the TNT would do just fine as well. I made a terrible mistake landing on this island. I almost ended the 200 days just like that walking up to this creeper. Lag was 1,000,000,000% against me, so this creeper lagged and almost killed me. This was the absolute closest that I've ever been to dying, and it almost ended it all. Luckily, I had some golden apples help me heal quicker. Once that happened, I thought it was just the best idea to go to the coral reef biome that I marked before. I had kept checking up on the bee dome because I only needed one more block of honey. I also installed another texture pack that shows the progress of beehives. So the next day, I decided to fly over to the reef coral biome. I got as much coral as I can because you can never have enough. Also, if I were to ever make any other machines, then this will be useful. Once I had all the materials, I headed over to the Nether and started building my machine. I didn't know how effective it was going to be, so we were about to find out. I'm not gonna lie, the tunnel is pretty big. Although I think I am unlucky with the spot that I chose to dig at. I came back with 3 ancient debris and started to smelt it all. It wasn't enough for 2 bars, but I had enough for 1. And like I say, it's better than nothing. Day 199 is the final day. So I do what I always do when the mark comes up. I do some maintenance checking all around my world and see if anything needs correction. I did think the walls looked pretty bland, so I decided to add some trees in the background. These were almost the exact same trees I made in 300 Days of Survival Minecraft. And I'm not gonna lie, the sunset made it look a lot better. The trees definitely added a lot more life. We also say one last goodbye before 200 days comes up. I had just learned that you can smelt tools and armor into iron nuggets to make iron bars. Not the actual iron bars, the ingots of course. But this actually really cleared up a lot of space in my chest. I had a lot of extra leftover chainmail armor. And before you know it, the night was over and I watched the sunset as day 200 comes up. If you guys made it this far, seriously, I do appreciate you. It helps the algorithm grow and it helps me grow. I'm on the edge of reaching 1,000 subscribers, so if you would, I so kindly ask that you subscribe. I recommend you turn on noties so you never miss when I upload. It's completely free and you can always unsubscribe whenever you'd like. Anyways, thanks for staying around and I'll catch you later.